Cooperation in evil or wrongdoing is one of the most important areas of ethics. It's important not just in pro-life work, but for all of us on a daily basis. If we haven't yet come across cooperation problems, chances are we haven't been looking. These problems can involve being an accessory after the fact by seeming to condone some past bad action, and/or they can relate to future wrongdoing, when we in effect, if not by intention, help or encourage someone in some new bad action, or of course omission. Such problems are relevant to us whether we are training or working as a doctor, nurse or pharmacist, for example, or simply deciding what books to buy or lend, or give as presents, or what charities to support, or what vaccines to get, or when to speak up, or when to be silent when pro-life views are attacked. We need to be accurate in working out exactly what is required of us morally, as things may be at stake that really matter, such as friendships, careers, and opportunities of various kinds to help people, and maybe save some lives. We must never, of course, be complicit in evil, but what counts as complicit? It's worth thinking hard about the principles in advance, so as to be ready for the next cooperation problem, which may come our way. I should stress that this is one area on which getting a second opinion from a trusted friend or ethical advisor can be important, as cooperation problems can get complicated and we may be too close to the problem to see it clearly. Not all cooperation in wrongdoing by others is itself morally wrong. On the contrary, some forms of cooperation where our intention is not that the wrong take place are sometimes morally permissible. For example, a taxpayer cooperates, however reluctantly, in the performance of abortions when she pays taxes which will be partly used to fund abortions on the NHS. In the same way, a bus driver who knows that some of his passengers will be getting off at the local abortion clinic also contributes, however reluctantly, to the fact that abortions will take place. In neither of these cases does the person involved in abortion, albeit remotely, intended to occur, nor on the face of it is his or her involvement otherwise unjustified. So what are the main principles? The most important distinction which we always have to keep in mind in this area is between formal and material cooperation. There are handouts, if anyone would like one and doesn't have one, just let me know. Formal cooperation occurs where the person cooperating intends to help the main wrongdoer in doing precisely what is wrong. Thus it's wrong not just to do abortions, if I'm a doctor, but to arrange deliberately to have a colleague do them instead. If it is wrong to do an abortion myself, it is wrong to get someone else to do one, perhaps in a futile attempt to keep my own hands clean. In fact, it is worse to get someone else involved, as two people are then implicated, not just one. Neither I nor my colleague is a cog in a machine. We are both moral agents with responsibilities, and I should not use my colleague to do my dirty work for me, so to speak. It's one thing to mention to my patient, as I encourage her to consider having her baby, that she has a legal right to get a second opinion from a doctor of her choice. That may be something I need to tell her to cover myself with my employer and the General Medical Council, so as to go on practicing as a doctor and helping patients as best I can. It may also be something that helps defuse the situation, so that my patient is more likely to hear what I have to say about support to have her baby. In contrast, it's something very different to tell my patient to go and find a pro-abortion doctor to advise her, or worse, tell her exactly who to go to. In the second case, I'm actually intending that she go to, or at least start looking for, a pro-abortion doctor as a means to getting an abortion. I am deliberately, formally cooperating at very least in my patient's abortion-seeking behaviour. I'm intending that you try to get an abortion elsewhere, if only as a way of getting her out of my office and getting myself out of strife. This is letting down my patient very badly, to say nothing of her baby and the doctor to whom I send them both. We need to remember here that preparing to do something morally wrong, or deliberately helping someone else prepare to do something morally wrong, is itself morally wrong. If I'm a mugger, it's wrong not just to mug people, but to buy a cosh and lie in wait. It's also wrong for others to help me do this, at least if they do that deliberately, such as by selling me a cosh for that very purpose, or telling me about good mugging areas in my neighbourhood, or suitable partners in crime. Similarly, if abortion is in fact wrongful homicide, as of course we believe it is, everything intended as preparation for abortion will be morally excluded for that reason. In saying that, I should stress that acting wrongly is not at all the same as being culpable. My pro-abortion colleague down the hall, to whom I send women, may not be particularly culpable for his pro-abortion consultations, depending on his own personal background and awareness of what he's really doing. Nonetheless, if I actually intend that he act in a way I know to be seriously wrong, my own act in sending women to him is also seriously wrong, and I may in fact be far more culpable than he is. Pro-lifers should be particularly careful not to get involved in formal cooperation with abortion preparations in the very attempt to save some lives. For example, a pro-life counselling organisation might advertise itself in such a way as to suggest, if not say, that it offers abortions or abortion referrals. It is one thing for a pro-life counselling centre to keep the word pro-life a bit discreet in its publicity. The centre may need to do this so as not to discourage women who desperately need to talk through their situation, but believe, thanks to media propaganda, that pro-lifers only care about saving babies. But if the pro-life counselling centre actually tries to tempt abortion-seeking women to try to access abortions via them, this does seem to be formal cooperation in abortion-seeking behaviour, albeit for the best possible motives. Good motives are very necessary to have, but morally speaking, they are not enough. Our more immediate intentions must be good as well. The end does not justify the means, and all our intentions must be morally good, not just our ultimate intentions. When it comes to intentions, the rule is one strike and you're out. So, pro-life counselling centres should not advertise themselves as places where abortions are performed or arranged. What if we don't work ourselves in such a centre, or not at any rate in the advertising side of things, and merely encourage individual women with doubts about their pregnancies to seek help from the centre? Would that be wrong as well? No, if we are simply encouraging the woman to take some time to think through her situation in a supportive environment and find out what help is available to her, there is nothing wrong with that. The fact we may not agree with 100% of what the centre does may be neither here nor there. On the contrary, such is the shortage of pro-life counselling centres, at least in some areas, that we need to take every opportunity of connecting women to people who may be able to help them, even if we don't agree with everything that the centre we refer them to does. This is rather like lending someone a book which will or may contain things which we disagree with, but overall is of benefit to the person to whom we lend it, for whom we intend it only as something helpful, not as something harmful. We've looked at one kind of formal cooperation in evil that pro-lifers might get involved in, albeit with good motives. Intending that women try to access abortions via a pro-life counselling centre whose publicity implies that abortion is something they do or arrange. What is another area of deliberate formal cooperation in evil that pro-life activists might also get involved in, with similarly good motives. Some of you may have heard the story of Lila Rose, a US pro-lifer who approached Planned Parenthood pretending to be involved herself in sex trafficking of underage girls. Predictably, she found that Planned Parenthood was rather unconcerned about protecting girls from sexual exploitation. She then made this information public in an attempt to damage Planned Parenthood by highlighting their appalling behaviour. While some pro-life commentators had problems with the lying involved, while admiring Lila Rose's commitment, what many did not notice was the fact that Lila Rose was actually intending that the clinic workers do something bad, i.e., that they take yet another opportunity to sell their evil wares. In other words, she was tempting the clinic workers to do evil, yet again, although she was, of course, doing this with the good further intention of discrediting Planned Parenthood in the eyes of the world. What are some other cooperation problems that can arise for pro-life people? One of the most difficult areas for pro-life activists and politicians to negotiate is identifying where it is permissible to vote for and or promote a proposed change in the law intended to improve an existing unjust legal situation, though only very incompletely. There are two quite different ways of trying to do this. One approach is to seek a selective ban on some injustices, while leaving other injustices unchanged. The law might prohibit only abortions on grounds of sex, for example, or only abortions in Scotland, or only partial birth abortions. In other words, the law leaves some abortions permitted, as opposed to actively permitting abortions which were not permitted before. While such a law is, of course, far from perfect, and may or may not be a good idea to promote, depending on political considerations, promoting such a law need not involve any formal cooperation in evil. After all, even a law which prohibits all abortions, if it does not also prohibit the destruction of IVF embryos, will leave permissible the destruction of IVF embryos if this is currently permitted. It will also leave permissible euthanasia of born human beings if euthanasia is currently permitted. Failing a revision of the entire criminal code in ways entirely consistent with morality, there is no escape from the need to single out particular groups at particular times we think we have some chance of protecting. Again, I should stress that whether a particular legal change is a good or bad idea politically will depend on very many factors, even if the proposed change does not involve formal cooperation in evil. An alternative approach, which is much more problematic in terms of cooperation, is regulation of the unjust activity, which unfortunately involves giving permission or instructions to people to do or prepare to do the wrongful act in question. Regulation necessarily involves us in formal cooperation in evil, wrongly intending that others choose wrongly. For example, that doctors prepare women for abortion, albeit in ways that reduce the risks and or help the woman reconsider, or that doctors attempt, successfully or otherwise, to obtain permission for the abortion from a second doctor. We should not be telling anyone how to do or prepare for abortion, euthanasia, embryo research, and so on, as doing or preparing for these things will inevitably be morally wrong. Rather, we should selectively ban whatever injustices we are able to ban at the moment in a prudent, mentioning the fact that you have a religious objection, if that's true, as well as a human rights objection to abortion, may perhaps be helpful sometimes in order to get the maximum protection in law. You may also want to stress, if you're a health professional, that you do not regard abortion as in the best interests of your patient, and therefore cannot help your patient get something you believe is not in her interests overall. Again, it's important to keep your cool in dealing with employers and show by the quality of the work you do and your flexibility where you can be flexible that you're a good person to work with and an asset to your employers. Why does all of this work matter so much, we might ask ourselves in these situations? Even at a natural level, it matters more than anything else what kind of people we become. We are not what we eat, or not only what we eat, but what we choose. While it may be desirable and even a duty to save our jobs and careers if we can do that morally, that is, there are certain things we simply cannot choose, as they make us genuinely complicit in evil. Failure to remember this harms not only others, including unborn children, but our own moral characters, ourselves at the very deepest level. On the other hand, we can be over-scrupulous, and this danger too must be avoided, as it will paralyse us and make us less productive and less helpful to others than we should be. After all, there are many shared projects in which we can make a real contribution, and can perhaps do so without complicity, as opposed to some acceptable level of unintentional material cooperation. The aim is, in other words, to pursue our own vocation, whatever this may be, to the best of our ability, while avoiding all wrongful cooperation, whether formal, intentional, or scandalously close material cooperation. Doing this successfully may require forward planning, as well as courage and commitment. Surviving as a pro-life person and making a contribution to the common good may require, in other words, the wisdom of the serpent, as well as the innocence of the dove. Thank you.